Bam.
This is Jesse Cox, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
This is great. I love doing this. I have been it's been over a year now. I have been collecting all of us from Delta Company 165th and talking about our incredible, and I got to thinking about this, Jesse, but our incredible deployment as the I-4 force to ensure the Dayton Peace Accords as counterintelligence agents, a company of counterintelligence agents, and really and interrogators and support and all these other people. But what a unique thing where a whole bunch of human people deploy as the tip of the spear for this international task force. Like, what an improbable thing to happen at the dawn of the digital age. And that means you and I are going to the field with laptops, removable hard drives, the internet. There's unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, drones now. We have all of these digital cameras. All of this stuff is going on. And we went from like, we're never going to deploy anywhere. Interrogators' jobs were going away forever. Like, hey, we're going to send you guys back to the States, and we don't know if we'll even have interrogators anymore. To there we are in the mud, in Europe, a war in Europe.
Yes, yeah, it was definitely an interesting time. Just being part of the counterintelligence community, it was just awe-inspiring to me. I was 20 years old when I went through AIT, and my first duty station there at the 165th. I wasn't even 21, so I didn't have my badge and credentials, so I was stuck in the orderly room. So I kind of got the butt of the deal on that. But definitely being in Bosnia was it was an amazing experience to be able to do our jobs and probably do things that most people hadn't done in decades. Actually run open sources and get out and talk to people and collect things and report that up. It's like 1 minute you're talking to a police chief, the next minute you're typing up a report in IIR, or there was another acronym for it while we were in theater, but and you didn't know if that information, it was just raw intel. You didn't know if it was going to end up, at the chief of staff's office, or, it wasn't going to make it out of theater. I mean, it was just it was very humbling to be in that situation. So yes, great experience.
The FIPR, the Force Protection and Information Report or Intelligence Report, depending on who you talk to. Yeah, the FIPR. Yeah. How do you describe to your friends what we did?
Well, I'll be honest. For years, I never talked about it, and I was just under the pretense that what I did, our tradecraft, our skill sets, we weren't supposed to talk about it. So I was very hush hush about what I did. But now these days, and just with technology and the internet, and gosh, you could Google CI agent these days and probably learn more than I could ever tell you. But and not to mention all the movies, but talking to people, I talked to my family and people that knew I was in the Army, even while I was in El Paso last week, and introduced myself and through my company. And one of the employees came back to me and said, "Hey, you were in the Army. What did you do?" And I always am hesitant to say I was a 97 Bravo as a counterintelligence agent, because then they just instantly shut off. They're like, I don't want to know anything else.
Yeah.
He's like, but the people that are interested and they want to know more, absolutely. I'll fill their head full of everything I can, everything that I can remember anyways.
It's just funny. I'm wearing my spy shirt, and one of the reasons why I started saying that and doing that was because I could tell someone what I did, and their eyes would glaze over. They wouldn't understand it. And I could say I was a spy, right? Because if the other side caught you, that's what they would charge you with, And then no one would believe you anyhow. You're like, it doesn't matter what I say. Either you don't care, you don't understand, or you think I'm lying anyhow. So I'll just be honest, And it's like, the more honest you were, the less it even mattered. It was like you could, and I would literally go into the field wherever I was, and I would say, yeah, I'm here to ask questions and find things out. If you don't want to answer one of my questions, don't,
Right.
And they're like, yeah, okay. So I became very open about, the fact that I was collecting intelligence, and I never asked. One of the things I learned, and I don't know if you guys ever learned this, but one of the things I learned was that if you wanted to find out where the bombs were, the worst way to find that out was to say, "Where are the bombs?"
Correct.
Like you would never find it out by doing that.
Well,
Did you? Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I mean, you just open yourself up to tell them what you're actually, digging for. I mean, that's
right.
Elicitation 101. You never talk about what you want to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes you do straight up ask what you're looking for, like if time is of the essence, and sometimes being bold is like saying, hey, yeah, I want to keep people safe, and so I do want to know where the bombs are, but there's also a million other things I'd like to know too, like what's the most important thing to know in your life, like what is the most important thing to you and your family and your kids, and they're like, yeah, the bombs are over there, and by the way, the most important thing is keeping my family safe, or whatever that is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Did you become a good agent, do you think? Did you ever get a chance to develop?
Not really. I became a good ops NCO.
Okay.
I probably I can't say that. In my own mind, I wasn't good enough to be a field agent. And the only reason why I say that is because, leaving the 165th, we deployed to Bosnia. We were there for 11 months, 12 months, damn near. Came back to Germany, went to PLDC, got promoted, got stationed at Fort Meade, Maryland, and once again ended up in the headquarters. I was the NCOIC of operations. I was the security guy. I was the training NCO. The drug and alcohol guy, the supply. It was all put on me, and I ran it like I figured I should. I did the best I could, and I got really good at that. And there were some opportunities that had come up outside of the field. I started to miss that. We were doing strategic debriefings, and I worked on the Crusader project, and worked with the Ballistic Missile Defense Organization doing tactical or strategic debriefing with them as well, and some of their technical leads, I guess. But I really missed the field. Where I could actually get out and do what I wanted to do, or what I needed to do. So I actually went back to Bosnia in '98, and it all comes rushing back. I don't feel that I was a good field agent, because I think I was better at the operation side of things. I was very detail oriented and stuck to the books and did what I had to do. But looking back, and I'll be honest, the things that we did in Bosnia were amazing. We did things that people aren't going to believe that we did. People just don't understand what our jobs were, what we went through, what we saw, what we heard, the shit we dealt with on a daily basis. It took me 6 months to walk on the grass when I left theater. It was just that, it was that impactful. But anyways, I don't think I ever developed into a solid agent. I took a lot of the skill set and a lot of the training, so much training. I mean, the Army was great with it. I did the ANACAPA criminal intelligence analysis class. I did the advanced read technique and the basic for interrogation and interviewing. I did the British interrogators training course. I did that. They were darn shots. It's just tons of training that they were willing to give us to make us better agents. And I just never felt that outside of a deployment, I was ever able to do that, because I was stuck in the headquarters building. Yeah,
that's a great point. And there's a lot of things I want to get to, and I want to come back to field work. I also want to come back to strategic debriefing, but I do want to talk about that preparedness for the field. When we deployed, I'm just going to be candid here about the leadership and what was available to them and what they provided us. I felt like they were incapable of preparing us for the job. Like, I didn't know what to do. Thankfully, Sergeant Dochko, because we had Virginia, and Gina was a great warrant officer. She knew how to protect us. She knew how to be a badass. She knew how to She wasn't afraid of protecting. She didn't want to worry about a career. She was like, we're going to go out and do our job. I don't know what that is because I'm an interrogator, but Bart knew what to do. And so
Yeah.
he got us off the camp every day. Turned out that was our job. And that's how we approached it. There's other ways to do it, but that's how we did it. And that was great because Greg McGowan and I were personable. And Bart said, you guys are the face of this team. You're going to go out and do things. And what Bart taught us was every day off the camp, write reports. And also, he's like, we have to be connected to everybody on this camp. If you can do someone a favor ahead of time, do it, because we're going to need to be like, we need to be important to everybody. Even if our reports don't help them, we are so small, we are so dependent on everybody. And so we learned to wire things. Like we were like, how do we do? And so we had VM, and I don't know this from memory. I know this because I relearned this. VMU-1 was attached to Delta Company. It was a Marine unit. They flew UAVs. And so they were attached to Delta. And they we went out to them and were like, hey, we are part of Delta Company. We're sort of your liaison force. If you guys need something, like you belong here. You're part of our unit, so we're going to help you out. And they're like, yeah, whatever. You guys are Army guys. Leave us alone. They're like, hey, by the way, we leave camp, and every now and then we need extra people to come with us. If you ever want to send someone with us, we'd love to have the extra bodies. We needed extra people. They had extra people because they really didn't need all of their people, because once they built their airfield, their op tempo wasn't that high, right? And so we would take these guys out, and they were so desperate to do anything. So they had this crazy thing. Anyhow, so the Marines that went out with us, they loved us because they got fed. They didn't have to do anything. They got to see stuff. Anyhow, so that was part of our thing, was to make sure we supported the PSYOPs folks. We supported the, civil affairs, all these teams that had access to go off the camp. We could attach to them and go out and do things, or we could self-patrol. But we weren't taught that. Like, no one showed us that. Bart knew how to do it. And if your NCO and warrant officer weren't strong, and they weren't willing to go and say, nope, this is what we do, you were told what to do. And who knows how to drive a CI team, at the non-CI level. Like, the teams, yeah, right. Like, you guys were lucky to go to a Polish unit, and I have to imagine they're like, whatever you guys want to do.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah. So, I mean, speaking on that point, we actually deployed. We flew out of what was that, Ramstein Air Base on Christmas Day in '95. Wow. And we landed in the snowstorm at the Tuzla Air Base. The cargo chief, he's yelling at us, "Get off the plane!" And the plane never stopped. And we're running down. We get out on the tarmac, and I'm just like in shock. It's snowstorm, and there's someone yelling at me to get off the tarmac, and there's only 4 of us. It was
how much gear do you have?
We had rucksacks and our duffels with us. That's what we had to carry around. We had a Humvee and a trailer full of, I think we had a GP small and the stove, the potbelly stove. We had all that stuff in the trailer. But
but just in the audience, that is rugged right there. So you have to carry you have 2 duffels, you have to carry yourself, you have a rucksack, you have a trailer and a Humvee and 4 dudes. Yeah. That's your living.
Right. And I had an M16, and one of the funny things, the first thing that we get into theater, they're like, go over there and get your ammo. So we walk over to this tent, and there's, some supply guy in there, and he's like, who are you attached to? And I can't for the life of me remember who we were there supporting. It was one of the airborne infantries. I think it was the Blue Falcons, like one of the first ones to secure the airbase. That's who we were there to support with CI support. So we tell them who we're with, and they're like, well, here's 6 bandoliers of 5.52, or 5.56. Here's some 7.62. Here's 4 grenades and 6 claymores. I'm like, whoa. It's like, I'll blow myself up with this stuff. I'm a CI guy, man. I'll take like a couple magazines. That's all I'm going to need.
And have some whiskey.
Exactly. Yeah. But being on Tuzla in those very early stages, we were not told what to do. We had no mission. I think actually there was what they called the HAC, the Human Intelligence Analysis Cell. So we'd go in there and just hang out with some of the other CI guys because we really didn't know what we were doing. And so we had Chief Mathis or Matheson, I think it was, and he was interrogator. He spoke Polish.
Right.
Had Sergeant Creighton, Patrick Harrington, specialist, and myself as a specialist. And we literally had to find things to do. We tried to squeeze into the strategic briefings and get in with the S2 and the G2 and figure out what was going on and where we needed to be. And essentially, they just said, "No, we don't have a use for you." And so which
is hilarious, by the way. You are a tactical field outside the camp asset, and they're like, "Whoa."
So get out of here. We did pretty much the same thing your team was doing. We were trying to make contacts with people in these different, groups or units. I actually ended up going out on a foot patrol all the way around the air base with the infantry guys. And as prepared as I thought I was, I never ever wanted to do that again. I mean, it's cold. It's I don't know. By this time, it's probably probably January. And if anyone doesn't know Bosnia, I mean, it's cold. It's cold there. And so I show up, I got my Gore-Tex and my polypropylene and my winter boots. And, I got my M16, shouldered, and I got my digital camera, and I'm ready to go on foot patrol with these infantry guys. And man, they gave me 4 kinds of cross-eyed looks. Every time someone walked past me, they'd look me up and down, and I didn't know why. So I got about, I don't know, maybe half a mile in, and sweat is just pouring off of me. I mean, I'm dying, because it's a forced march. And I'm trying to take pictures, and I got my M16 on my shoulder. And I still remember this. One of the platoon leaders comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, soldier, I need you to put that rifle in your hand and act like a soldier." He said, I don't care about your camera." Because I told him, I said, I'm supposed to take cameras or take pictures of the perimeter fence. We're doing a physical security assessment for the airbase. And he's like, "I don't care about your pictures." He said, "I just want to make sure you don't die." That's what he said. I'm like, "Oh, okay." So literally I'm holding my M16 with one hand, trying to take pictures. And these cameras,
it's so big.
Oh man, it's massive. It was like a video camera, but it took like still shots.
Right.
Anyways, that was one of my first experiences of trying to squeeze into doing, my job, physical security. It was one of our aspects of the MOS. And, so anyways, we made another contact, through the G2. There was a contractor there on the airbase. It was BDM, I think it was. And they were contracted to to hire linguists for the theater, for all the operational cells and everything else. So we were tasked with interviewing the linguists, the local nationals, as they come in to get hired for this job. So we essentially are doing debriefings with these employees or with these civilians. And we did one day, I think there was one on base, and we did it here and there, hit and miss. Then we went downtown to Tuzla to the university. We were there for like 9 or 10 hours. There must have been 100 people that we had to get through. And, it just turns into this, basic tactical questioning about, where were you during the war? Did you serve? Did you know anyone that served? Did you witness any atrocities? Well, all these things. And, we're getting good intel. We're breaking it down. And so essentially we took all this information. We were taking pictures, we utilized the digital camera, taking, mug shots of these civilians. And we entered it all into, I think it was Microsoft Access. Blasted new technology. I'm like, what is this novelty here? I mean, it's crazy. So we actually created a database of local nationals that was used throughout the theater for this BDM. I think that's who the contractor was. BDM.
Press pause right here. Press pause, because people have to understand, when you go out and you walk that perimeter and you take pictures, and then you come back and you turn that into a product. Like, okay, we went on a patrol today or yesterday, and now you can show a brief to the commander, and you're like, here's a perimeter or pictures of your camp. We make these assessments. Oh, and the next day, like, we went out, we talked to all of these people. Here's pictures of them. This, to the colonels of that time, was impossible. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I remember I took we had this laptop, everybody, right? And one of the capabilities of the laptop was you could take the screen of the laptop and you could remove it, turn it around, and put it back into place. And so as you sit there and you brief somebody, you just took apart your laptop, which is already blowing people's minds. And now they're looking at your screen and they're like, what are you doing? Like, it was a whole, like, amazing, a whole new world. And so when they would see these products, some of them got it. Some of them were so gobsmacked by the fact that you had all this stuff. They were like, what are you doing? Like, you could go into your office and print out the picture. You just gave it to them and go, here's the picture. They're like, where's your dark room? Like, they had no idea. And so when you say Access or PowerPoint or anything, like, how did you make all these squiggly lines to represent Constantino? Like, well, I did that in PowerPoint. And even within our field, like, I knew how to use PowerPoint because it wasn't that hard. I'd gone to, an exercise, and I just sat there and I just kind of learned how to use the basics of it. And it wasn't that hard, because I wasn't afraid of computers and I had a college degree and I'd use computers. But these little things gave you such a leg up over anybody else who's like, I don't know, these computers, I don't bake, or whatever they would say, So you really could blow away anybody out there who's like, I don't know what you're doing. And by the end of that deployment, people were in chat rooms, and it was amazing. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but folks have to understand, like, what is not even, it's beyond normal. It's expected now. This was all impossibly unknown back then.
Yeah, brand new technology for the field. We were using laptops in the office, obviously, but it wasn't to be able to take them with us into the field and take digital photos and transmit those. And it was unheard of.
Right.
And so, yes, it was pretty impressive to go in and sit down with a colonel or I never made it to the general briefing. I think it was Cherry. Was it Cherry who was?
That sounds right. Yeah.
I think it was. I never made it to his table, but there were definitely a lot of opportunity for us to shine at that point. And we started coming up with these this raw intelligence from doing these debriefings or interviews or whatever you want to call them. And, we're firing this stuff out. And then, next thing you know, they're like, hey, we want to talk to this person. Hey, we need more information on this. And hey, where is this person at right now? We're like, I don't know. We didn't hire them. And so we were, and essentially, we would document war crimes and we would document a lot of things that, some of the atrocities I had heard, and all of this is literally English to English because we're interviewing them to be translators. And so that was probably my best experience in country at that point. Was that interaction, that ability to have a English to English conversation with someone. Moving forward, when we started using,
let me press hold right here. When the one thing we did have, and this is a credit to Delta Company and Fort Huachuca, was we had a basic understanding of how to ask questions, and we need a lot of practice at it, but we knew to develop fully, like, okay, when you ask questions, basic interrogatives, and just keep going and keep going and keep going and continue to. So if you were at all good at that, you were capable you were able in the field to bring something back, right? And then hopefully your boss could go, hey, dummy, keep going, and just keep expanding and color, and maybe you could be led to the point where when you came back, you can at least make a product. Because if you didn't have that, then you couldn't really go out. And not everybody had that capability. And keep in mind, some of the people we're deploying with, this is for the audience, this, but if you had an interrogator and they're looking at this as an interrogator and they weren't able to turn it into a field expedient questioning thing, and they were trying to do an interrogation, that wouldn't work. Like, you had to be able to say what happened, and then what was going on around you, and then try to get more, and also create a trust, even if it was temporary, so that you could expand that network that you're working for. So this was it was a skill set that we did have, but it was very raw. And you had to figure out who had the ability to talk to anybody and come out with something that you could then add a picture to, put some text to, and say, hey, boss, here's something you didn't know today. And then have the boss go, holy shit, these guys are worthwhile. How do we support these guys?
That's right.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that context because people don't know.
Yeah.
Even for the Polish dude, you know,
we had to prove our worth to so many people. And, you know, let's fast forward, you know, we were talking about the Nord-Pol Brigade.
Right.
So it was a multinational brigade that operated, I think their headquarters was in Doboj in the Serbian-held territories. And that's actually where we were base camped, was with them. And that, I think we got there in April, and then I left in October, like October 26th, I think, to be precise, is when we actually drove back to the American side. We gathered up there at whatever that base camp was with the 165th. Anyways, so operating with the Nords and the Polish. So there were Norwegians, Swedes, Finns, the Polish, the Danish. I mean, there was some Lithuanians, I mean, there's a whole mix of individuals, different militaries and different specialties and skill sets and things. And it was a very tricky time because we weren't given a lot of guidance on what sort of intel we were allowed to collect, because, you know, we were a NATO force, we're the US, and we're working with non-NATO countries. Yeah. So, you know, Poland, not in NATO. Right. Sweden, not in NATO. Finland, not in NATO. So it was very tough for us to be able to share intel that we gathered, because we had to run it up. And I mean, there's different levels, like intel and theater, in things that we could or couldn't share. You know, and the Russians were operating out of the American sector as well, which was a whole different story. We never worked with the Russians, and I think there was a reason why we didn't actively have a CI team in the Russian area. We knew the Russians were already collecting on us, just because of chatter that they were parking their military vehicles outside the headquarters and sitting there for hours, and just we could only assume what they were listening to. Anyways, so, but there was a very fine line of what we could or couldn't share. So a lot of it broke down to just local stuff. You know, what's pertinent, what isn't, weapons cache, you know, fines, you know, local crime, that sort of stuff is really what we were feeding to the Nord-Pol Brigade. We did 16 physical security assessments on all of their base camps. Wow. And probably the most fun was we did the Polish, and they were living in a hotel. And it's literally just on the outskirts of a town, Libica or something. I can't remember the actual name of the town, but it was a hotel. I mean, it was like 8 stories tall. There's no security, no walls. I mean, they put some concertina wire around the front entrance, I think. And I'm like, what is going on? They started to put sandbags around the balconies. Of course, you know, you can only put so many sandbags on a balcony in a hotel built in a third world country before it falls through. So there wasn't a lot of security, and so it was very challenging to look, I guess, at what we viewed as security versus what the Nord-Pol Brigade viewed as security. They would go out at night in civilian clothes, go downtown and go drinking at the bar. That's insane. I mean, you would just see them. They would just walk out the front gate in civilian clothes and go downtown. Yeah. Because they're like, we're in Europe. This is where we live. Correct. Yeah. They had a different mindset. They literally had a different mindset. Their approach to peace, well, you know, what we call peacekeeping is really peace enforcement operations. They had a different mindset about it. You know, they wanted the locals to see that they were there for them. You know, they did a lot of humanitarian stuff. They did a lot of infrastructure development. They were building bridges. And then the Serbs blew one up because they built it to connect the Zos over one of the river on the south side of Doboj. Built a bridge, and then there was like a big mob situation. That was the first time I ever lock and loaded in country, literally.
Yeah.
But they blew it up, and it was a big ordeal. But anyways,
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, and there's Eric Barraclough checking in down below. Eric, and also Jarrett. I don't know if you saw Jarrett Koltoff checked in also, by the way. So other Delta Company folks have checked in. So it's
Awesome.
it's fun to get. And I got some other Delta Company folks lined up. If you're from Delta Company, you're watching this, definitely send me a DM so we can get you on the show. I want to go back into. You talked about strategic debriefing. Did you ever have an opportunity to go to that school to actually professionally learn how to do strategic debriefing?
No, sir. I was kind of taught on the fly. I had an operations operator. He was a civilian, and she is a civilian. There, I was at the 310th in my battalion, attached to the 902nd at Fort Meade. His name was Stacy Williams. Former CIA agent, got out, went civilian. He was actually our operations officer, and he was doing some liaison and trying to get us some work, if you will. And we started doing some collaboration with the Ballistic Missile Defense Organization. I did a lot of work in the Pentagon at that time. Crystal City, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the location of it, but it's at the actual office is in Crystal City. Spent a lot of time down there, and really it's just, we had a basic set of questions, and we were debriefing or interviewing civilians that had traveled abroad and had come back. And we just wanted to see if they had been contacted by FIST and foreign intelligence services, and what information they had asked for, or what that situation looked like. And it actually spurred up a lot of work for us. Generated a lot of higher intel, if you will, that came out of it. So it was good stuff.
It's interesting. If you're contacted by FIST, they tend to not wear a spy shirt. They just tend to be like, "Hey, how you doing?" And it's a very soft approach. And you, unless you think about it, right? Yeah, like that's their job, is to be very clever about how they do it. And then you're like, "Hey, wait a second," So it is. You don't have to contact everybody, but that kind of a program, it is helpful to have that sort of an approach to go. Anything like this ever happened? And because then it also teaches us if that's a part of our game. And this is one of the things that's amazing, Jesse, about counterintelligence is there are so many disciplines in there. Like you understanding like how is your adversary evolving their game, evolving their approach, so that you can understand like how do we counter their counter, and then the dance continues, right? So it's always interesting to see that. I want to go back to becoming a good agent. This is one of the things I'm fascinated by. I had the good fortune in my career because I didn't do a linear path, right? I stayed at the field level. I didn't have to go to ops. I didn't have to go run a platoon. I didn't go to OCS. I didn't do all these things. I just kept deploying and going off the camp and just field work. I got really, really good at being a field agent. Now, you asked me to go run a platoon, no idea, right? Like not a clue. You asked me to set up operations, maybe I'd be helpful, maybe. But if you said, "Hey, Pete, I need you to go into a foreign area that you don't know anything about and set up operations and connect and build a network with people we can never meet," look out. There's nobody in the Army that's better than me at that, right? Like I can do that. But just because I stayed going off the camp, I never stopped, right? I mean, over 1,000 combat patrols. So I got really good. And you look at like what it takes to do that and what the doctrine would look like. There's no doctrine written for that. Like it stops. There's a wall where the doctrine just quits. And the schools stop. And then you just keep going and you go and you go. And you're just like, oh my gosh. Like one of the things we learned is that, spot and assess and, all these kind of things. You get way past that. And you realize you are the access. Yeah. Like I was the access. I had to be the person who met the people I needed to meet so that I could befriend the person who was the evil person, or who was the person, so that I could become their friend. Like, that's how it had to be, because it's a totally different world. So when you have access to the location where the things that happen enough times, you develop your own kind of thing. Do we need to have more focus on that? Do we need to understand what it takes to develop a great field agent? We're not talking about strategic stuff at all right now. We're talking about tactical collectors. Do you think we need to develop that, or is it so hit and miss when we actually need that skill? Do we really need to develop that, do you think? Or I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think it's definitely an underrated, I guess, opportunity. I think we, like, even in school, we were all hung up on the fact that we're going to be wearing a suit and tie and have a badge, and
Right.
we're never going to see the field, and we're going to have all this great fun, and some people were lucky enough to take that path in their career and enjoy that. And then there were those of us that we actually enjoyed wearing the BDUs and being dirty and out talking to people, and but we bring to the table something more more important, I think, than any other intelligence collection, is because we can get, you talked about access. The perfect way to rate a source, is are they reliable, and then do they have access to the information that we're trying to get? What better source of information than to have boots on the ground, who is at a level, I wouldn't say friendship, but companionship with the local police chief or the mayor, who's funneling information this way and that, yes. What is it? Public affairs and psyops and who's the other one?
Civil affairs.
Yeah, civil affairs. So that they do a lot of that as well. They do a lot of the collaboration and things, but they're more feeding them information, propaganda, and trying to set up a better image of who we are. And we're just the opposite. We're like, it's like, hey man, let's talk about your grandkids. Let's hey, is this your wife, man? I thought it was your daughter at first. Those are the kind of things that you have to get. You really have to bring that to the table, and I don't think the school or anyone else is going to prepare you for it. It was just like us. I mean, we were thrown into a situation where we had to adapt to get the job done, and so yes, I think there should be a I wouldn't say a criteria, but there should be something in the textbooks about that path, because I think it's very opportunistic for any command in any theater, whether it's combat, peacekeeping, peace enforcement, stabilization, whatever you want to call it, humanitarian. It's very it's a good situation to be in, to have boots on the ground, your own people out there collecting information that otherwise you're not going to get. Because you're going to intercept someone's cell phone call or whatever the situation is. It's some of my old buddies used to call it fishing. They'd sit and listen, SIGINT guys, and they'd sit and listen to hours and hours of radio transmissions, and they might get like maybe something once a week or something. We're getting information every day. It's every day, and they're just giving it to us. So yes, I think it's definitely important to bring that to the table, and whether they teach it in school or they write another AR on it. I don't know what they want to do with it, but I think it's definitely something that would benefit any field operation.
When you look back and you think about how much it sucked to get off of a plane that never stops moving in Tuzla with just a Humvee, and not an up armored Humvee, but basically a canvas covered Humvee. And a trailer. And these trailers are not big. These are tiny. No. It's like a pickup bed trailer,
Literally. Yeah.
And they're like, all right, guys, see you later. And you're like, hey, we don't really have, they're gone. We don't have fuel. Literally, you don't have fuel. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. Diesel was like gold.
Yeah, no ammo, no fuel. Okay, you have some food and no money. They didn't look, Here's $50,000. You guys should be okay for a while. There was no fucking plan. Like,
Nothing.
just go fucking do it.
Yeah.
That is awesome that you guys were able to do that. That is such a cool story. Can you think about that? Like, look at your line of work right now. If you did something like that right now with, your team, like, all right, you guys, see you later. You'd be on this plane. Good luck. Swat them all in the ass.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It wouldn't be a good situation, but to me, it speaks highly, I guess, of, I guess in my mind back then, I took it the wrong way. I guess I was kind of a hothead back in my younger days, and I was spur of the moment, someone would say something, I'm gone, I'm 3 steps ahead of everyone else. But, so I didn't really take it personally. I took it as a challenge,
Okay.
And, honestly, some days it was nice just to not have to get out of my sleeping bag, but, you can only do that for so many days. But anyways, yeah, I totally agree. Now, in today's military, I'm not sure. I've lost contact with literally everyone, and some people have retired and that I worked with, and you and I served with. I just don't know what that looks like now. Is it still the same situation where when the military deploys, is there a CI team assigned to a forward unit that's providing them with human intelligence? Is that in place now? I don't know.
They've gotten further away from it. They've tried to become more law enforcement focused, which, is a way to do it. And they've tried to remove their command away from it, so, and I don't want to speak to all that stuff because really I'm like I'm pretty far removed from it, but, and they have this human collection effort. But I would say this too, the capability of a human collector is still dramatically limited to what the commander allows them to do. And I don't know that commanders know what a human collection team should and is capable of. Like one of the things that I would do, because there's work to do every day, right? And so if we went out with whatever whatever the team was, right? Like we're going to go inoculate goats. I always use this example. We're going to go inoculate goats today. And so I'd go back the next day or 2 days or a week later. I'd say, hey, what happened here the other day? Because that's a great question. And they're like, well, you guys came out here and inoculated our goats. Like, what do you mean you guys? Like, what does all that mean? And you would ask. And it was never, because what the briefing was like, we escorted the Afghan, Minister of Agriculture as he, did his own agricultural inoculation operation. And then you find out, like, that's not what they think happened here. And that would drive the commander crazy because he knows, because I had built up trust with the commander, and it's like, what do you mean nobody there thinks that the Afghan, like, yeah, I'm just telling you what they said. By the way, not this guy. I talked about 25 different people, and then I walked over here, and then, and I'd done my job. And it's like, when you find out that nobody believes what we briefed ourselves, you've got a problem. And the problem isn't them. The problem is us, and so you have that sophistication and collection. We need that. We need that capability taught in our schoolhouse.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I want to go back to you though, because it's really about you. When you're thinking about the era that we did this and the fact that we really were the main effort as a collection force, right? It wasn't the Rangers. It wasn't the infantry units. It wasn't tankers. It wasn't, as much as they all are like the king of battle and all of that, it wasn't them. It was us going out, whatever unit you're attached to or assigned to, whatever area it was. Like if there was a mass grave, guess who's going with their cameras,
That's right. Yeah.
Did you realize that at the time?
No, not at all. No, I didn't know the magnitude. Well, it really wasn't even the magnitude. It was just our breadth of influence that we really had. We touched all aspects of that operation, and regardless of what unit you were assigned to, at some point, our intel, our feedback, our loop of sources would have crossed your path at some point or another.
When you think back at that time, what's the highlight of that nearly year of deployment? Like when you think like, oh man, you know what, we had this one day. Are there any of those days where you're just like, this was the best?
Man, I talked earlier about the mob. So they built this bridge, and it was part of the Dayton Accord to enable resettlement. So the Bosniaks or the Muslims were crossing into the Serbian area, and they were going to resettle some of their the homes along the Zos. And so they crossed. They came down the road. The Serbs came out of the woodwork. It turned into a big riot. The Serbs were throwing things. The Muslims were throwing things. The Norwegians were caught in the middle of it. And we're at the end of the road, and me and my team, and we're talking to some Serbian police who were they had police checkpoints everywhere. So we're just standing there talking to them, and a Norwegian guy comes running up the road, and he's like, "Hey, we need help. Our guys are caught in the mob." And so, I said earlier, I'm a hothead. I'm 3 steps ahead of everyone else. I literally took off running behind the Norwegian guy, and I think it must have been a 1.5 mile run down the road, full battle gear. I'm hoofing it, and literally running into like up behind these Serbians who were throwing things and yelling, and it's just it's chaos. So I get up to where the other Norwegian soldiers are, and we're kind of turning around, and we're just kind of putting space between the Muslims and the Serbs. And I'm trying to, my broken Bosnian, uredu, stoy, and just trying to get them to look at me and not everyone else. And so anyways, they pushed the Bosniaks, the Muslims, back across the bridge, and then the Serbs kept pushing us. So we started a police line. And like I said earlier, it was the first time I ever locked and loaded in country. And it was very memorable to have, the guy was probably only 40 years old, but he looked like he was 80. 3 teeth and just rugged life. And he's yelling in my face, and I have no idea what he's saying. Yeah. And all I can do is just hold on to my M16. I was petrified. I was like 20, 21, 20. I turned 22 in February that year. But so that was probably my most memorable moment. There's been some comical things. There was a car bomb and some other things.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
Your car bomb hilarity story. Yeah.
We thought they were
you talk about like a year before we were there was atrocity going on, right? These guys were not just at each other's throat, but at each other's throats with knives and bombs. And so when you're running into that, you're running into actual, legitimate peacekeeping, but in a kinetic way.
Yeah. it was years of anger, and you could feel it. And to have that right in my face, it really, that's probably one of the more memorable experiences, I guess, is just being in the middle of that. There's a lot of CI agent stuff that we did, and I was actually running working a source. We had a local national that worked on the base. Her sister worked for the IPTF, the International Police Task Force, and we were trying to recruit her to feed us information on what the task force was working on. They were finding weapons caches and weren't reporting them. So we assumed there was a lot of dirty cops involved, working with the Serbs more so, and not doing what they were supposed to be doing. So anyways, and that's when they blew the bridge up. I'm there. I'm eating dinner with this girl's parents, and I've got the translator there, and we're just shooting the shit. I'm drinking rakia, and I'm about 4 shots in, and then all of a sudden the house shakes, and I run outside, and like this big mushroom cloud where they just bombed the bridge that they just built. So there's lots of memorable things, and it's so.
And that's pretty action filled for the whole theater. That much volatility. Where we were, it was pretty sleepy. You don't know that going in.
Yeah, it was pretty sketchy. I mean, that was all right there in Doughboy. The car bombing, we thought we were targeting the police station. So Doughboy is who is it? Archon's Tigers. They were very active in that area, and we figured that they were assuming that there were connections from, because obviously all the police are ex-military. The police chiefs and the mayors and everything. I mean, they're probably ex-special forces, or they held a higher rank in the military during the war, and now they just automatically get sucked up into these political positions. So we assumed that's who they were after. And I said it was comical because the bomb actually blew up the apartment building across the street. They parked it on the wrong side of the street, and it was a mess. No one was killed. It really wasn't much of a car bomb. So anyways.
Yeah. When you're working with your peers and you're watching each other do their judo, right? And you're learning from each other all the time. One of the things that was great, and this is not by design, it was by dumb luck, but I went back to Huachuca and I taught at the Counterintelligence Force Protection Source Operation course, which is like literally the perfect next assignment. Like we all should have been rotated through there and taught, like go do 6 months and go teach there and go teach for a year. But I actually went there, and Nancy Richards was there, and she's like, you just did this, you're going to work with me. And if she hadn't been, wouldn't happen, right? Like it just was complete dumb luck. And so I got to watch everybody else, and I played roles and I taught, and it was like, it's this really great experience, and it really improved me as an agent. But also everybody who came through and I played roles for, I got to guide them and make them, just in my own little way, slightly better agents. It was amazing. Imagine if you got to go do that. But you did get to, in real time, watch Sergeant Creighton. You got to watch Pat. And who else was on your team? Oh, yeah. So I don't know how Chief Matheson was, but, you guys all got to learn from each other and try different things out. How was that experience? Because, I don't know how you guys divided the work, but like it was usually Greg's day, my day, Greg's day, my day. And, that's how we divided the work. How did you guys divide the work?
So I was the only static member of it was Team 13. That was our number. To this day, 13 is my luckiest number. So, but and you said we had Sergeant Creighton, Pat Harrington, Chief Matheson. That only lasted till April or May, I think, and then we lost Harrington, and then Chief Matheson left theater, and then I think Chief McDonald came in, and then we had Chief Whitlow, and I mean Sergeant Boyan came in. We had I don't know.
They were rotating all the time.
Correct. I was the only stable force. I shouldn't say force. They were the only stable member with consistency.
Oh, you're a force, all right. 3 steps in a rage. Here comes Jesse.
So, literally, in a lot of the operations and a lot of the interviews and things, obviously, only 2 people could ever go in because we worked in 4-man teams. We had to have 2 vehicles when we leave base. So 1 or 2 of us was always outside with the Humvees, and posting up while 2 people went inside. So we did rotate through quite a bit of that. We had several translators too. I mean, they were just doling them out. They're like, absolutely not. That one is horrible. We need someone else. Yeah. We had 2 amazing translators. One was a Marine electrician. Her name was Tatiana Omanovich. Amazing. I would not want to mess with her. Tough to the bone, and she just got right down to the business. And she followed the instructions word for word. And then we had a warrant officer, an EOD warrant officer, Chief Militich, who was phenomenal. But anyways, we really shared in the workload. When new members would come in, we would sit down and we talk about the area. We talk about how they did things in Nord Pole, and which was a little different. I mean, like I said, I walked up the hill outside the base when I was doing source ops, and it was just me and the translator. And I literally walked over to this person's house. And so it was completely different. We had a good time. We'll just say that.
Yeah. Hey, we're getting ready to wind up here. We got about 5 or 10 minutes left tops. But are there any questions you want to ask me? I've been beating on you and making you do all the lifting. What do you want to ask me?
Oh, wow, man, I didn't prepare any questions.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to. Yeah.
So I do remember I owe you a softball glove.
You do. You do. You do. Absolutely. You do. That is so true. That's funny. You don't have to. You don't have to give me. I did love that glove, but you're all right. I'm retired from playing softball, so you don't have to pay that back. I forgive that debt a long time ago. So you're good there. We had a lot of good times going out drinking, and a lot of hilarity and things that don't need repeating on the air live. We had a lot of fun. When you look back now on that time, and you realize, just how special it was, right? Like you think, oh, man, this is, I don't know if you have any grandkids yet, but you get to tell them, I was a spy. I wasn't the Cold War, but the first thing after the Cold War, I was a spy in that.
It was definitely that, and now I always describe myself as the spy catcher or the spy hunter, more
Fair
so.
Enough. Right.
And
again, if you get arrested by the Chinese or the people that you're catching, this
100%. Yeah. And talking about that, we did a lot of operations like right on the Serbian border and all that. Yeah. We were like very leery, like, nope, I'm not going over there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So regardless, though, it's definitely good to be able to speak about it more openly and freely. I love talking about my days in the Army, and everyone's like, oh, it's the big fishtail, and half the time people just look at me like I'm crazy, like, oh, you didn't do all that shit. I'm like, no, really, I didn't. That's and to think about it, most of us, we've probably forgotten more about human intelligence collection and running sources and surveillance and all this. We've probably forgotten more about that than most people will ever know existed. And to me, I think that speaks tons for anyone who's ever been in the CI field. It's definitely a small caliber of human beings who get to enjoy that out of their life.
You were a badged and credentialed federal agent.
Yes.
Like that's how serious that whole thing was. You did get out though. You didn't stay. How come? What would it have taken to get you to stay?
So it just there was some pressure from the wife at the time to get out. So I was deployed or on TDY or here or there training this and that. I was gone quite a bit. We had two young kids, two young sons, Seth and Caleb, and it was a strain, and so I got out. I turned down some good jobs doing personal security investigations and as a civilian in Europe and some different things. As I was transitioning out, those are the things that were available to me, and I turned all that down just to go back to Illinois.
Yeah.
I struggled, but I found my calling. I'm in logistics now, and I've never looked back. So.
Yeah, and you shouldn't. Yeah, because I guarantee if you went to watch it and be like, hey, I trained here and I did this job and it was really great and it was a lot of fun. CI has turned its back on you as well, and so they don't care. Anything else you want to add to this? Like, is there any other no shit there I was, or any other story you want to tell? I mean, this is we're gonna wrap it up here. What else do you want to say?
No, not really. I think one of the funnest things I did, I supported the JMAS, the Joint Military Attaché School. And we actually trained the new attachés on surveillance. So we would actually perform surveillance. We would follow these guys from their house in the morning all the way to the DIA, and take pictures of them. And they're running red lights and speeding, and because they're actually in training, they're acting like they're in a foreign country. We ran like 30 surveillance missions, and managed about 15 agents during that time. I was the NCO of AC. So I coordinated a lot of that. And so that was probably the most fun thing. And even to this day, I'll be going down the interstate and I'm just like, I'll start rattling off surveillance chatter, Charlie X-ray 191 star inside, so that's probably the funnest thing that I did. And the most, that was a great time.
Oh my gosh. I just want to add, just because it is a lot of fun. I very short amount of time, I had a contract surveillance job for the government, and we were doing like the final exercise, and it was in DC, and the rain was starting to come down. It was that time of day, and I'm like, I know they're going to call end X, which is end exercise for everybody listening, and we all got our little radio comms in, and I am going to be the next guy in line, and so we're all talking our little code talk like Jesse was just displaying there. And I know that I'm going to be the next guy. I'm like, man, they're going to call this thing, and either they're going to call it like, and I'm never going to get it, and that's going to be great because that's fine. We've all had plenty of time, and it's Friday. We'd all like to be done, or I'm going to have to go and do the next thing, and it's going to involve me getting into a cab. And so, sure enough, I got to run across the street, and I have to hop in a cab, and I have to say, follow that car. And so I'm in the cab, fully committed to follow that car, and the guy's like, really? And I have to come up with the whole story, and I'm like, that guy, they follow that guy. And then I hear it mayor, index. And I'm like, and now I have to get out of the cab. And now I have to like come with the cab. I'm like, you know what? This isn't right. This isn't right. No, stop. And the guy's like, yes, it is. I did such a great job. He's like, yes, sir. This is not right. This is not the way. So he had bought my jilted lover story so hard, and I'm like, all right, well then there you go. There's the training effect. And we do get to have a great time like that in our training. Like sitting in a cafe and doing these stories and having to be quick on your feet. There is a lot of training effect in that because that is sort of how our world goes, where like something weird happens, right? And you're in the middle of the training and someone walks up to you and asks you for directions in German, and you're like, I'm trying to follow, and like your brain scrambles, and these things happen.
Yes.
All right, man. I'm gonna roll the credits. Stand by. I'll be right back to you.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you